do you have to actively think about evolving yourself? Like, do you think like you have to put yourself through certain experiences and situations in life to grow as an artist, as your professional output is concerned, or do you kind of let things sort of naturally take its course?
Both. So one is, and I think that natural cause happens at your work desk, in your studio. My art studio is my space to completely be myself, make experiments, go wrong, go right, etc. But the most important part of it for letting things happen naturally is being there every day,
Showing up.
showing up. So that's the most, well, some people will say that's also a very hard part, but that's the kind of discipline. So it's an input into your creative life that you need to, it doesn't matter. You need to bring yourself to that place. Sometimes you don't have ideas. Sometimes you don't know what you're going to do next, but just being there, I think, is the most natural thing you can do for your growth, right? But the other aspect of it is, for sure, I think it is very important for any artist, to align themselves with what's going on out there, what has been done, what is being done. For example, delve into history, delve into what has happened in the past in your field, or get inspiration from so many different things. There are museums, there are art events, there are art shows. Going and showing up for your friends as well when they are, expressing themselves. I think everything is a learning opportunity. So I do both. I spend time in my studio. That's my sacred place. That's my sacred time. That's my non-negotiable time. Even if for life comes in the way, right? I don't have more than 2 hours to be in the studio today. I will still, my endeavor is to still put those 2 hours over there, as opposed to you just skipping it altogether.
Hello and welcome to the Idea Sandbox podcast. I'm your host, Rajiv. I had the absolute pleasure and privilege of hosting Preeti Varma from New York City. Preeti is a visual artist whose work has been featured in major cities like New York City, LA, Houston, Bangalore, and Singapore. Why am I chatting with an artist? Well, I believe in the power of interdisciplinary dialogue as it pertains to collaboration, problem solving, and in general sharing of good ideas from various fields. Preeti talks a little bit about her career leap that she made from the corporate world to the world of art, the angst that comes with making the switch, as well as the parts which isn't often talked about, which I thought was very interesting. And then we move into her approach to work, how she views the creative act of putting out new work, and what it means to continuously evolve and having a growth mindset, and the angst that comes with changing styles within your career, and how to follow your strong inclinations if you have those during your career. All of this, and we chatted about a variety of different things. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did having it. Please subscribe and like this episode and give me some comments and feedback. I would love to read those and improve on my craft. Love and peace. The Idea Sandbox. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay.
I was ready ever since you said we are live.
Great. But I mean, to be very honest with you, Preeti, I didn't think this was going to happen. I'm so thankful it did happen, that we could make this happen. You're a busy person. You're this very accomplished, abstract expressionist artist from New York City. And I am this kind of Midwestern dude sitting somewhere in central Illinois. So your commitments, the time you spend to do what you do, your craft, all of the things that you do, you took some time off to talk to me. I really thank you for that. I just really, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate you coming on the Idea Sandbox podcast, and I welcome to this conversation.
Thank you, Rajiv. And really, I'm grateful equally. So I think just as much as, you were looking forward to this, it was something I was looking forward to. I don't think I'm as accomplished that I have no time to talk to someone who's interested to talk to me. And yeah, it's just that, sometimes life just becomes chaotic and you're trying to balance several balls and juggle several balls, and, one or two drops. So it's just been a little hectic, but I had every intention and I was looking forward to speaking to you on this podcast.
Thank you.
And, for me, it's a big deal that you spoke to someone who I consider in a very high regard, which is my mentor, my guru, uh, artist Hari Ramji. Well, and then I'm speaking to you on the same platform, so it's a big deal for me as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the reason why I kind of said that so accomplished, I mean, from my viewpoint, I looked at your Instagram profile and all the paintings that you put up there and your website and all of that stuff. Like, I mean, I, I, it's just mind blowing. It's beautiful. The stuff that you make is just absolutely beautiful. It is exhilarating to look at. And I mean, I went through it a few times, and I just that I just feel I'm speaking to somebody very important and accomplished. Therefore, it's just in
Thank
my
you.
eyes. Yeah.
No, I'm not complaining about you calling me very accomplished, but different people may have different views on that, It
Yeah.
depends on what lens you're looking from. And thank you for
Yes.
sharing the lens that you're looking at it from. I've tried to do whatever I can in last many years that I have been, invested in following this path as an artist. And I'm glad it's coming across well to you. And I
Yeah.
really appreciate that. Yeah.
Can you talk about how you got into that? I mean, so your website, you talk about like you were in a corporate job for 18 years and then you made the leap into this world. What were you doing and how did you get in here to this space?
So takes me back in time. Actually, when I graduated from school, my arts teacher, Mr. Bose, this was the Mothers International School in Delhi, in India. He told me that I must only, very specifically, he said this, I must only apply to art schools, and I don't need to really go, searching for any other path, like how, especially in India, you go for all the traditional paths. Okay, you become a doctor, an engineer, or whatever, or what have you, the sort of the norms. But he told me very specifically that I should only apply to art schools. And that also he told me which school, JJ School of Arts, that's all. And he said, you're an artist. And that's the path you need to follow. And so remember that I'm very young at this time, and I'm also trying to figure out my life. And so that was great advice based on, the kind of time I spent in throughout my growing up years in the field of arts. I know every child is a painter, and I think we are all born creative. So I had a lot of interest. So the school used to send me for painting competitions here and there, along with two other children. So the three of us used to go representing the school for inter-school, intra-school. So his advice was based on how much time I had spent doing this and whatever potential he saw. However, I applied to a couple of good schools and I got through, and I was thinking, how am I going to make a living? How am I going to support myself being an artist? And I'm talking about around 1990 and 1989, 1990. And I'm like, how am I going to support myself?
Was this out of, sorry to interrupt, but was this out of high school?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's when you decide, right? What next steps are you going to take? What undergraduate program you're going to take, which would then hopefully lead to your vocation, something that you love doing, but also something that can sustain you. So you're channeling your interest into that stream of academics to go into your next step. And I just couldn't figure out what will happen next after I study arts. I spent 3 years doing this. And then how am I going to sustain myself? And I thought a lot about it. I got through some schools, but I, at that point, wanted to be independent, and I didn't want my dad to keep working so hard, to support my education or to then support me, because I couldn't see a career path being an artist back in the day. Like, exactly what would I do? I could have become a commercial artist. I didn't have any interest in doing that. So it does happen that at some point I changed my path and I went into the world of, large corporations, and I chose a career in, or rather, the career in hospitality found me. And I gravitated towards it because I love working with people, and I love being with people. I'm very curious. And it has a service element where you're being of some nature of service, to people, and that kind of appealed to me. So I decided to get into hospitality, and then I stayed there for the next 18 years. And while I was down this path, for the first 13 years, I did not pursue my art. I had no time. I got totally sucked into what I was doing. Hospitality is a very demanding career. I started right from training and then working in different areas of hospitality. But finally and majorly, I spent most of my time after the first 3 years in sales and marketing.
So when you say hospitality, could you maybe be more, I don't know, from more specific? Like, is it like the hotel industry?
Yeah, the hotel
On the corporate side, or is it more the consumer-facing side of it?
Yeah, so it was in the hotel industry. So I went into that kind of world. It was all corporate. It was institutional. I was just living a very, very different kind of life. And it is when I reached Bangalore, and this is almost 13 and a half years by now that I have been in the industry, that I found a pace of life that was more conducive to doing something other than just my work. The pace itself, just culturally, Delhi and Mumbai are extremely fast-paced centers, commercial centers, both of them. And so as a sales and marketing person, I kept extremely busy out there. But when I reached Bangalore, it's a smaller city. Back in the day, I think it was 2000 and maybe 3 that I moved to Bangalore. And I was there till 2000, I think 8. But in 2003, Bangalore was still a very sleepy town. Beautiful, sleepy town, And it was just at the cusp of, the explosion from all the back office operations that were being set up out there. So I went there with my husband, and he was with this company, and they went there to set up the business. So I found a lot of time, and after 13 and a half years, I finally got back to my art after a hiatus of 13 and a half years. I found the pace to catch my breath and reconnect with that, deeply personal side to me, which was about arts. So I started painting again. And interestingly, and I never knew that, I have no idea how. By then I was already married for 7-8 years. My husband never knew I was an artist. One day he came back from work and he saw me painting, and I used to work on the dining table. And he came back home one night and he saw that I'm an artist. It was a revolution to him. And I suppose I was so caught up in my work that side of me just got completely eclipsed. And that's how I found my way back in 2002, 2003, when I started painting again into the art world. So it was a bit of around, I was there, then I got into, there was a inflection point, and I got into the corporate world, thinking about, some existential things that I felt I needed to take care of. And then I got back into, I will say, what was just so intrinsic to me that it just never went away. And I found my way back to it very naturally, I think. Very, very naturally. And from that point, I think the course of my life started changing and when it became more deliberate over a point of time. I gave a very long answer to a very simple question you asked.
That's the way I like it. Oh my God. There's so many questions that you've opened up a whole lot of threads for me to ask you a lot of follow-up questions. But I just find it fascinating, by the way, that you got back into it in 2003. Like how,
Two, I think, something like that.
yeah, like, so did you feel any kind of resistance when you were getting right back into it? Or was it just kind of like this exhilarating experience where like, oh God, this feels so, I feel like I'm living again or something. Not that you were not feeling like you were alive or living. It just added a new dimension to your life. Was there kind of this kind of, revelation moment that you just kind of, you fell in love with that feeling of expressing yourself in the most authentic way? I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is that true? Is that true that when you're working on art, when you're putting out art, when you're on any form of art, there is this kind of like you're pouring out what comes to you sort of naturally from your unconscious or subconscious to your conscious, and did it feel that way? Is that how you experienced that moment when you were getting back into it, or is it more gradual?
I think all of what you said is true. All of it happens, not just me, I think to anybody.
Yeah.
Who's experiencing art in many different ways. And for me, I think it just came very naturally. As I said, I do believe I was always an artist first, maybe. Always an artist. So it just flowed. It absolutely just flowed. And when I was in school, we in the school they used to have make these handmade papers. I was very attracted to that. So the first thing I did in Bangalore was I went to the ashram because the mother's Sri Aurobindo ashram existed out there, and I went and I bought this paper. So I reconnected with that past time. I love working with that natural paper with textures, etc. I bought myself paints and I just started. And I still remember the first painting, which I still have, was called The Circle of Life. And that's the first thing I made. And it had all these different elements from life, fire, air, water, etc. And if you ask me what was I thinking, I don't know. But I was thinking about Circle of Life because it was a full circle for me suddenly. I didn't realize that as I was doing it. I wasn't doing it with the intention of, with any deliberate intention of, oh, I am an artist and I must change my path. None of that. It was just that I had a need to express myself. I found the pace and I got in touch with, I don't know if I can call it my roots, but something very deep inside me. And that's how it started. And a lot of what artists do is conscious, but there is a huge subconscious element to it also. And there are different kinds of art, but I don't think any of us can escape our subconscious. And it's more so evident when you're painting and you're doing something abstract. I think it's even more, it plays into it even more because it's not representational. You're not looking at something and then trying to, convert it onto an image on your canvas or your paper or whatever it is, right?
So were you always like drawing abstract figures, or is it sort of naturally evolved over a period of time?
I don't think you can just start from abstract. It's a process, it's a journey.
Yeah.
Abstraction also comes from the objective. So I think the object or the objective comes before the non-objective expression, which is abstraction.
Okay, so you'll have to bring it down to my level. So let me rephrase what I said, so I don't get misunderstood. What I was asking was the kind of style you have with your current style, I should say. Would it be fair to call it abstract expressionist art or paintings?
Yes. Though I think I am more in the category of visceral abstraction or figurative abstraction, where it's some sort of a culmination of figuration and abstraction. So when you look at some of my paintings, you will see some recognizable elements in some of them.
Okay.
But I'm striving for pure abstraction as I'm going along. So most of it is an abstract expressionism is a movement that has inspired me a lot, and I think is at the core of all the artwork that I do.
Can you describe to me what abstract expressionism is?
Ooh, technical. I mean, to put it very simply, as you were asking me, did I start with abstraction? It's more about the essence of something that you see, that you translate. It's how you feel is what gets translated into lines and shapes and the kind of paint to depict that mood.
Okay.
Or the energy, how your strokes are going. It could be soft, it could be aggressive, all of that. And that is very different from, let's say, I tell you to paint a fire. There's a fireplace and there is a fire going on. If for an objective painting, you would look at that and you would try to replicate, the flames, what all different tones or values or colors, etc., are there in it. And you're trying to replicate it such that by the time you're done, when I look at the fireplace and I look at the fireplace you're created, I can see the lightness. I can say, yes, this is a fireplace. And in your case, I can say, this is the fireplace that I see in front of me, if I'm in the same area. Or if I'm not, if it's hung on a wall or it's in a museum, it's in a gallery, I can look at it and I can say it's a fireplace. But what if I told you, don't let me recognize that, right? How would you paint the fireplace without making it actually look like the fireplace? What would it be to you? How would you depict, that structure or the flames or the warmth from it or the brilliance from it, right? Or the fumes coming out of it, if there are fumes. How does it make you feel in that moment? What are you receiving? It's what your eyes see and what your mind sort of experiences or calculates in that moment. How do you translate that experience? That would be abstraction. It could be anything. It could be, children playing in the garden. So one painting of that could be actual children playing in a beautiful, green garden. There are flowers and you're painting those flowers, whatever it is. There are trees and we can see that and we can get sucked into it. You look at that painting and when it's so realistic and it's so beautifully done, or whichever form it is done in, where you can see there are trees, there are plants, there are children. A good work of art should invite you. And you're there in the garden with those children experiencing that, that smell of the grass, etc. So that's one thing. The other is that you take that sensation and you translate it with paints, with maybe the green colors, maybe the kind of shapes that you create. Maybe there are some hints of some kind of playfulness, which is not in form of a figure, but in some nature, whatever is the imagination of artists or however they want to express it. And that would be abstraction.
Okay. And it could it be anything that you want it to be? So if you're trying to depict a child, could you depict it with some geometrical shape instead?
Yeah.
Or are there rules to it that it has to have like some human-like figure in it?
No.
Okay.
No. It is, from what I understand, it is mainly in a sense of what is in front of you.
Okay.
So it could be however you want to. It could be like a bunch of triangles.
Yeah.
Right?
Could
But it's how you see, it's so individual. It's not some. I mean, there are rules of drawing and painting, of course. And famously, Picasso used to say, to break the rules, you have to know the rules first. Right? So there are rules in how you use the medium. The paints. There are oil paints, there are acrylic paints, there are watercolors. How you lay them on top of each other, and what kind of materials support oils versus acrylic, which are water-based, or watercolors and lots of other media. So there are those fundamentals which are good to know, so that you can make a work that is strong and it can also last. Plus, it can do what it was intended for. So, yeah, that there are rules, but there are no rules for imagination. There are no rules for, creativity.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So I've been doing this on my phone for a few years now. So I've got a stylus on my Samsung Note, and have this app called Concepts. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's just you can do a lot of free-form stuff, or there's this, you could use guides and stuff like that. Anyway, I've been getting into that more seriously for the last 5 to 6 months now, and every time I'm creating something new, it's joyful, it's fun. There's a sense that something is coming out of me that needed to come out in some way, but there's also a lot of formlessness and like amorphous stuff on there. And I mean, it's like, but it's okay. I find a lot of satisfaction at the end of it. That's why I was asking. I guess part of my question was that, could you just do it to get your just whatever is out inside of you just out there without any objective? Can you just do the thing that comes to your hand, so to speak, and it looks good to you?
You mean not look at something, but
translate
something that you're experiencing?
Yeah,
sure. But nothing. Again, my personal views, and I'm sure maybe they're different and from somebody else's, but I don't think anything exists in isolation. Right? Even what I'm experiencing emanates from something. It could be memories. Maybe just that feeling of how I felt when the balloon guy used to walk around the street, in my native place. And the joy that I experienced when this guy would come with all these colorful balloons as a child. Or it could be a memory of sadness about some incident. And all of it will express itself differently. Right? So it can emanate from, it doesn't have to come from an object.
Okay.
It can come from anything. I mean, for example, an emotion of love. Right? Sometimes it's very hard to pinpoint exactly one thing that you're feeling when, you've got your butterflies in your tummy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Love of different kind. So
I had some of that this afternoon.
Sorry?
I had some of that this afternoon before I was talking to you. It's a little
right. So if I think the idea is to the idea is to um, channel that energy.
Mm.
And, you know, as I'm going along, I'm realizing one very important aspect of being an artist. It has always been true, and I don't think that can ever go away, no matter how much technology we get into the fray. But being an artist is also about being in touch with yourself at a very deep level. It is not about deciphering the subconscious, right? It's not about, and we can spend a lifetime deconstructing not only other thoughts processes, for example, you know, historians or theorists, etc., but our own. Because at the end of the day, we can educate ourselves, right? And
Mhm.
it's great to do that because it adds value and richness to your thinking.
To
And
know more about yourself is what you're saying.
both to know about what's going around you, what has been done. Yeah, I'm talking about art and or anything for that matter, right? I feel like all those rich experiences that you have in life of education, of interactions, etc., everything feeds into who you are.
Mhm.
And so we can spend a lifetime trying to deconstruct just that, let alone plethora of education that is available there. But at some point, the most important thing I think for an artist is to deeply connect with themselves so that you really understand what are you trying to translate or what do you want to translate. It's not always very obvious to us, as obvious as it may look for you to sometimes see something. Not all of it is obvious. There are a lot of struggles. There are blocks. You've heard
Mhm.
of writer's block, right?
Mhm.
There are blocks. There are times I've sat in front of my a canvas, maybe halfway through. I know it's not done, but I'm sitting there and I am just not able to speak to it anymore, or it is not talking to me. I've literally sat in front of a canvas saying, "Talk to me,"
Wow.
right? So it's a very deeply personal experience when you're creating art. Um, you have to dive into any ideas or issues that you're dealing with that you want to express by way of, you know, art or anything personal that you're experiencing that you want to translate. Did I make sense?
You made a lot of sense. I'm trying to process it.
I think it's the same as for you, right? When you decided that you want to speak to different people, and we've had conversations in the past about your motivations in doing that, and they're all very interesting. You're a seeker. I'm a seeker too.
Hmm.
Right? Want to talk to people, and that's your motivation. You've dug deep inside to see what is it that fulfills you,
Yeah.
and this, amongst other things that you do, gives you that sense of fulfillment. I don't think it's any different for an artist. That I'm not happy if I see something that I've made and it doesn't fulfill me. And there are times that, you know, people come to my studio and they're like, "Oh, this is done. This looks great. You should stop now." All well-meaning advice
Mhm.
or thoughts. And I really appreciate people coming into my studio. In fact, I welcome them. Uh, but the thing is that it needs to rest with me. You know, no matter how much somebody says that this is done or I think you should stop working, an artist will find it extremely hard to adhere to that. You have to reach a point of satisfaction and realization, some sort of a self-realization with the work. That, yeah, it is at that point. And with painting, it's so hard, right? When you look at so much paint on a canvas, you're like, how do you ever decide which mark is the last mark?
Mm.
But believe me, artists do know when to stop. They find it very hard, but they do know when to stop. And that point is very deeply personal.
Yeah, for
Also,
me,
excuse me.
so I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please go ahead. What were you saying?
I'm sorry, I lost that thought. My throat got a little scratchy.
Yeah, so I was going to add to that where to me it's kind of weird when I had this one podcast with this guy, data scientist guy, whatever. We spoke for a couple hours. And during the conversation, you have this sense you're not thinking, you're just kind of having it. And then you're talking and back and forth and all of that stuff. And the whole thing was done. And I just didn't want to look at it for a long time, for almost like 4, 5, 6 months, because I felt just, one, I felt like it's kind of vain to go back and look at yourself, blah, 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 whatever judgment I had. And the other one was like, yeah, it was okay, kind of like this kind of mediocre feeling about it. But then one day, I opened it up and played it. I was in a different kind of a mood, and then, oh yeah, this is okay. This is not so bad. This is okay. I shouldn't be so hard on myself or so dismissive. So it's kind of like weirdly, and that's happened on several podcasts like that. And one of it actually, I felt really kind of very down. I'm never going to look at this ever again. I'm done with this. I put it out, and but then, because I was like stumbling for words, I was looking for things to talk about with this person. It was way out of my comfort zone and things like that, the subject matter. And then it was just an hour conversation, whatever. And then I was like, man, I'm never going to look. And then again, almost like 7, 8 months later, I'm in a different mood. I kind of open it up, and then it was like, oh yes, it's not that bad. Actually, I was trying to make sense, and the person who was talking was very interesting. So we kept it going. So anyway.
That right there is a great example of all the different stages of creation. Right? This whole thing was baking while you came to that point of either accepting, changing, editing, etc., whatever you did, to say, okay, now I am ready to share this with the world.
But I'd already shared it at that point.
Oh, you had already shared it. Yeah, these are like what are they called? This is the postmortem.
Yeah. I'd already shared it, but I never wanted to look at it. Sometimes I like to look at it, but if I feel like, well, I had this good conversation with this person, I was, I like Geeta Ramanujam. She's this extremely accomplished storyteller lady. I actually wanted to go and see some parts of it because she had made some very interesting points. So that's one example. But then a lot of it is also like, I put it out there and I'm like, I'm not going to look at it because I was just kind of like, it's hard enough to have the conversation. Now I have to go back and look at myself stumbling through it, that sort of thing. But then it turned out that I did okay, and the conversation was actually interesting to me. And people gave me feedback, and it was good or whatever. Yeah, it takes time sometimes for me to sort of really kind of, like you were saying, just kind of, I don't know, process it internally, subconsciously, or whatever. And then when I look at the product, I'm like, maybe I'm a little more forgiving to myself, or maybe I have this kind of perfect view or vision for what a conversation should be, and this was whatever the perfect is. There's no perfect. There's no absolutes there, right? Like, but then it was fun in another way that I just didn't. I had this kind of lens put on it. I had an expectation on it, but then it was like, no, it was also good from a different angle. I had to change my perspective to look at it differently.
You've just described everything I do every day in my studio.
Wow, really?
Yes. It's the creative process. You're painting, and I don't know how many times I do this dance of, going close to the canvas, going away from it, going close to it, looking at it from different angles, and experiencing it trying to experience it as a whole. You have to keep shifting your perspective, because nobody just stands in front of a canvas in one angle and keeps looking at it. People are going all over the painting to experience it. So before that happens, I experience my work from different perspectives, physically, intellectually, etc. And at some point, I think that I've reached that point of resolution, which doesn't mean you will receive it in the same way. But as a creator, at that point, most of the times, I'm at peace with it. Sometimes I may give up and I may say, really, I don't think I can do anything more with this. There is nothing more that I want to say here.
Mhm.
And I leave it. So I think it's a very normal creative process that you create something. During your creation, you're doing all these things, and then you, after it's out there, it gives you some fodder for looking at what you've done. So many times I look at my past works, like even something I did 2 years back sometimes, or 4 years back, or I keep looking at works that I created, the first, after that hiatus of 13 years. And those are still very important works. And I know there is some connection. And in some ways, I am going to go back to it. I still don't know how, because it's very different from what I'm doing right now. But there is something that I was doing there that I have now, after so many years, the desire to pick it up again. So that's part of all the reflection you do as a creative person. Nothing is like, oh, it's done and never to be, looked at again. Everything I do from now on till however long I walk this earth as an artist, everything is related. It's not like one day I suddenly become a different person, and because I've created, instead of a painting, I've created a photo work. It doesn't mean I've changed my style or I've become somebody else. No, I have found a different way of expressing myself within a similar realm. Yes, I could be working on different series, and I suppose you're hearing the New York sirens that there are so many of. It's not coming. Okay. So different ideas can sometimes demand different mediums to express it, right? But the hand of the artist, you will be able to see it throughout their oeuvre. You'll be able to say, this is this person's work. You'll be able to see those subtle, not so subtle connections. It could be visual, it's in the articulation, it's in maybe the themes that the artist is addressing, and so on and so forth. Everything we do is connected to each other, including in your career.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how was that? How did your corporate life, I mean, you've lived, I'm guessing, in a very kind of structured way. You were going about your work, right? Like there were strict parameters around what you did and what you didn't do, and results and numbers and things like that. And then you're going to this world where there is a sense of formlessness, if I'm not mistaken. There's this kind of, there's no structure, and then you put structure to things. Or am I even thinking about it correctly? Or is there structure? It's just that it's a different kind of structure.
It's an excellent question. Excellent. And one that is definitely very personal to me. I thought I led you into asking that in a very unplanned way. I didn't think, but as you were speaking, I sort of knew you were going in this, and I think it's a really great thing to ponder about. You're absolutely right. In the corporate world, everything is so structured, and you have these outcomes, right, that you think about, that you have to work backwards from. And when I went to art school in 2011, so this is after Bangalore, when I moved to Singapore, and to backtrack a little bit, I had my first show, which was formed of these works that I started making again. And Hari Ramji saw my work, and he felt like there was potential there, and they were having a retrospective, he and some of his other art colleagues, and they invited me to show 5 of my works over there. So that kind of inspired me and spurred me on even more. It kind of firmly put that thought in my head about slowly getting back. Initially without my realizing, but eventually I became very focused about doing that. And when I left Bangalore and I went to Singapore, there's this amazing school there, and I applied and got through. And the very challenge that you're talking about is what I faced in the first year of my art school. And one day, one of the profs told me that, Preeti, you can't think about it like this. You can't think of the outcome. He actually spelled it out. He said, you can't think about the outcome. That's not, I understand you've been in that world. And he really picked on it, that I've been in that world. So he realized why I was doing it. I'm thinking about, let's call it, for the lack of better words, a product or a finished product, and then working backwards from it. And he did not agree with that approach. And he accepted that I may be used to doing that. And I've done that for almost 20 years. And I have to change my outlook. I have to lose the structure. It was hard. I came from this very organized, put together world into this very sort of ambivalent world of art. And initially my head was spinning because I had to really lose my very tight grip on the real world. And, experience that, like you said, formlessness. And it wasn't easy. It's 20 years of wiring.
Yeah. I mean, your brain is kind of well worn in those pathways, right?
Absolutely. And it was challenging, I will admit. It was really challenging. I had to really loosen my grip on everything I held very close to myself because I was so used to approaching things in that fashion. And I would say probably by second year of art school, I was probably a little more ingrained in how I needed to approach things in art world. But it has taken me a long time still.
Yeah.
I sometimes, when I find myself doing certain things in unstructured, I wouldn't say artists are not structured. That'll be very wrong. Artists are not unstructured people. I think it's a myth. Everybody thinks artists are like these lost professors, walking around just thinking of things from thin air, etc. No, you can't. That's not how you can make something which is valid and concrete and wholesome. It comes from somewhere. So, you have to structure your thought process. That can't be unstructured as an artist, right? So, but it was a problem initially. I really, really had to loosen it. And as I would say that the first point of a change happening is an acceptance. I am so grateful to that professor who actually managed to say this to me word to word in a very candid way, right? He didn't mince his words. He just told me as he saw it that I'm acknowledging that you've done this, but I'm telling you it will not work here. I'm so grateful to him. And therein started that acceptance that yes, I'm doing it, evaluating my methods, evaluating my outlook. And as I got more and more entrenched into, the art world, through education, I was studying art history, I was studying art theory, I was surrounded by art all the time. I slowly started warming up to this new way of looking at things. But I will say that my past life definitely has, as I said, everything is connected, right? I'd had a certain kind of experience in life. And as an artist, you're weaving those things in your work. Just experientially. Just experientially. Like I've had a life rich with human interaction. It's given me an opportunity to look at people, relationships, human behavior at a very close quarter. All kinds of human behaviors. And at all levels, you're dealing with a CEO. I remember one time when I interacted very briefly with Dalai Lama. There are creatives, there are artists, there are business people, there are heads of states, etc. It's like the entire spectrum of humankind out there is something that I have gone through. I'm blessed and I feel grateful for that. Sometimes when I think of, oh, had I started this back in the day, I would have had an additional 20 years of experience of being an artist.
Mm-hmm.
I do not live in that regret at all, because I know what I gained in those 20 years is equally valuable.
Yeah.
And I may not today be able to fully translate that yet into things that I want to make, create, speak about. But I know it is all connected. It comes out in different ways, and it will keep informing my work. That's what I mean by, everything is connected.
Yeah, yeah. Like there's this kind of conservation of energy where you've put in so much in other times and situations in your life that has to ultimately, and this is my belief anyway, I'm trying to add to this conversation, is that
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like it's you've when you've put in all that work, you've persevered on various different things, and then you move to another thing. It's not like that thing that you did in the past evaporates. There's this,
No.
you're bringing to bear all of that in some unconscious ways, in some conscious ways, I guess. I mean that's something I have to ponder sometimes, right? Like, because I, like, similar to you, I mean, if it just similarity in the corporate sense, like I worked for close to 18 years now, and then go into this world, which is again, kind of unstructured and all of that stuff. And I initially, at least, I would ponder over that thing, like, man, I spent all this time, people are climbing corporate ladders and this and that, like all the, the rest of my cohort, my peers are all doing these other things, but I just chose to get off the bus. And then like what sitting with a camera and talking to very interesting people like yourself. But then how will this all translate? And it does translate in the in some of it in the conscious sense. Definitely, I had the opportunity to work along some amazing engineers along the years that have given me their wisdom. But anyway, I don't mean to make it about myself.
No, why not? But that's a very, very valid point. And you can see how it builds up, right? Your ability to communicate with all people from different walks of life, and maybe some more than the other, who are from a similar background as yours.
Yeah.
Your experience in that field gives you an ability to have engaging conversations, right? And your experience of being out there in the world gives you that edge, as opposed to somebody who's just out of college, who's approaching things from I don't know, from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So experience to me is it can just never be undermined, of any nature, I think. But the point is that if you make something of that experience, sometimes in life we can go through so many episodes or so many different kind of experiences. And I was telling you earlier that it takes a lifetime to just deconstruct your own thoughts, your own life and experiences, right? Sometimes even figuring out how are these things connected, or what can I make of this? How can I pour this into something else, etc., etc. I see everything as an opportunity to learn and grow. And it's a growth mindset. So if I'm in any situation, and it can be a bad situation, right? It can be a bad situation. I just feel, okay, so what can I learn from this that I can apply to some other aspect of my life? Or, how does it help me to, once you're done going over the dramatics of it, that you think about how can this help? How can this feed into something else that I may want to do? How can it help me to become a better person? Or how can it inform some of what I'm doing? Right? So that's what experiences do. They expose you to different aspects of life. What is that phrase? Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Gained. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah.
You can keep protecting yourself from things and say, oh no, that's not my path. I don't want to do that. Or be scared and say, no, I'm an engineer. How can I possibly do photography? Or how can I'm too scared. I can't do this. I can't do that for different reasons, right? Or that it doesn't fit in with who I am in the in the outer world. And so I'm not going to do it. But the point is, the minute we give ourselves that freedom to just be whoever we can be in a very authentic way, it is all going to add up. Sometimes mysteriously, sometimes it will take time for us to figure out when it happens.
Yeah, for me, it was definitely the fear of not having enough money to lead my life, really.
It's a real fear.
Yeah.
It's an absolutely real fear.
Yeah.
And even for me, right, when I was in the corporate world, I had a paycheck that came every month.
Right.
From going from there to not knowing where my next paycheck is coming from, it's not easy for us in the creative world.
So how did you cross that how did you cross that bridge? Or I guess at what point did you say, all right, this is it, man, I'm going to pursue this no matter what happens. If I don't make money or fame or whatever, or maybe you hit that point, maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but was there a point like that for you to say, this is, I'm going to swing for the fences, and whatever happens, and then things just sort of fell in place afterwards?
Yeah, in first year of art school. That happened for me in first year of art school when I told myself, this is it. Because when I went to the art school after being in the corporate world for so long, I wasn't sure, right? I had a deep desire to study arts. I was an artist, but I had lived a different life. I wasn't sure this was going to work. And my thought process was, so if it doesn't work, I don't end up pursuing arts as a career. I can always go back with all the experience I have. I can always go back to doing a job and, doing something that I love doing. And that's that.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, I would have still followed my heart and my passion by at least studying something that I had been wanting to study 20 years back. And I was deeply passionate about that.
Mm.
I was very committed to that idea at that point in time, that I want to go to the art school. I want to study fine arts. And then we'll take it on from there. That in the end, at least I don't lose anything. I gain knowledge. I gain that new experience. But in the first year when I went, when I joined the school and I was there, I just felt like fish in water. I thought I had found my world. This is my world. These are my people. This is where I belong, or I want to belong.
Wow. Okay.
Very clear to me in the first year that this is it. I am not going back to any corporate thing. I am not going back to any job. This is my life. This is what gives me true meaning, true joy. And it totally fulfills me. It was just a very deep connection. And then all bets were off. That's when I just jumped into it with all my heart, with all my resources, with all my time. I was just in it. No confusion thereafter.
Was there kind of an effortlessness to the whole thing? Like, it was kind of just naturally coming to you, all of those things, to just work hard at it, all of that stuff?
Absolutely. As I said, I was fish in water.
Mm-hmm.
Fish that was So whatever that fish feels when it's in water,
Yeah.
that's how I fish. I just know the phrase, but I can imagine a fish in water is its natural prey, right?
Yeah, it's such, I feel like that sentiment is so underrated in society. Like you, where you sort of feel, I guess coming from like even the societal, I don't know if we would call brainwashing, or there's a societal messaging, there's memetics at play. People want you to conform to a particular a life, or society has this kind of expectation out of you, blah blah blah, all of these things. And in my case, at least I can speak for myself, is that you start living that sort of that way ultimately, because you start believing your own story at some point. um and then at some point, like after, like I said, 17, 18 years, I felt like, man, this just, I'm not getting my it scratched here. There's this thing that I want to do, and I want to bring to bear all these qualities that I have, but then I just can't do it. And then I'm worried about like society looking at you this way, and it did happen ultimately. All of these things happened that I feared, like people calling me and trying to talk me out of it, and this and that. But then there's that moment when you step in and you feel like, wow, this is great. This feels like the thing that I would do if nobody paid me or paid me. I would just get up and do this thing because it brings me infinite amount of joy and satisfaction. And then that sort of emotion itself will sort of carry you from there. You don't have to worry about where that next paycheck or whatever is going to come from. I know I'm speaking from a very privileged viewpoint. I'm in the US, I had a job and all that, I get all of that, but I'm just saying, from as a general rule, it just makes sense to me that would be sort of the, not the aha moment, but that would be a signal from your inside to say, you're just gonna like keep going, just put one foot in front of the next and just keep going. I had that fear initially when I started, is that like, oh, you're thinking long term and all this is going to crash and burn, especially if it's on the internet. People are going to see all your successes and failures and stuff. Like, I'm going to be embarrassed and all of it. Like, don't worry about any of that. I had to really talk my way back out of that and say, all right, one foot in front of the next. And are you enjoying it? Are you bringing to bear all the things that you wanted to do? If you are, then that's fine. Just keep going, and don't, just do the thing that brings you that ultimate happiness or joy. I don't know.
Yeah, as they live the true, authentic version of yourself.
Yeah.
And it is challenging, right? Like you said, that there is a picture of you that you had in mind, or a picture that world around you makes you believe about who you are.
Right.
All of us struggle from it at different points, right? So it's not an easy journey. This is called being human.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It is.
it's part of the process. There are no easy paths. There is no bed of roses. There is no prescribed
There's no free lunch.
roadmap. There is no prescribed roadmap that when this happens, that will go right, or etc., etc., etc. I think more and more we are realizing that it's not a linear path, and it's fine. I think now we live in a world, I mean, I would say 20 years or whatever, 20, 25 years back, I don't think that's the world we lived in, right? There were like a certain ways that you were expected to, present yourself, lead your lives. But now I'm actually really excited about the world we are in today, which accepts a lot more originality and non-linear thinking, expression. It's a great time to be in. Absolutely great time to be in. And whatever you and I have done in the past, it's the time to express it all and take opportunity in this time.
How do you keep yourself, like, do you have to actively think about evolving yourself? Like, do you think like you have to put yourself through certain experiences and situations in life to grow as an artist, as your professional output is concerned, or do you kind of let things sort of naturally take its course?
Both. So one is, and I think that natural cause happens at your work desk, in your studio. My art studio is my space to completely be myself, make experiments, go wrong, go right, etc. But the most important part of it for letting things happen naturally is being there every day,
Showing up.
showing up. So that's the most, well, some people will say that's also a very hard part, but that's the kind of discipline. So it's an input into your creative life that you need to, it doesn't matter. You need to bring yourself to that place. Sometimes you don't have ideas. Sometimes you don't know what you're going to do next, but just being there, I think, is the most natural thing you can do for your growth. Right? But the other aspect of it is, for sure, I think it is very important for any artist, to align themselves with what's going on out there, what has been done, what is being done. For example, delve into history, delve into what has happened in the past in your field, or get inspiration from so many different things. There are museums, there are art events, there are art shows. Going and showing up for your friends as well when they are, expressing themselves. I think everything is a learning opportunity. So I do both. I spend time in my studio. That's my sacred place. That's my sacred time. That's my non-negotiable time. Even if for life comes in the way, right? I don't have more than 2 hours to be in the studio today. I will still, my endeavor is to still put those 2 hours over there, as opposed to you just skipping it altogether. So yes, I do invest in that, mindset and routine, and reading and learning and growing and looking at art around me. Travel if I need to be, to see some, something that's inspiring to me. Spend time with my art colleagues. I think having connections and having a community is a very important part of it as well. And I actively seek to engage with people who are similarly inspired.
You can probably hear a chainsaw going in my background. If it happens too much,
No, I can't. I
you
can't.
can't. All right, thank God. I have my garage door open. This is my garage studio, so I have my garage door open, and most of the time it's kind of quiet. But then there's sometimes people trying to cut wood and stuff. We're in the Midwest, unlike New York City.
As I said, we have our own challenges. We have a siren every second.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Right.
Yeah, so you that's fascinating to me that there's both aspects of it. You're actively sort of challenging yourself to go experiencing things, reading up on things, and I mean there's definitely parallels to that. In my kind of line of work that I'm trying to get into is also like, reading up books, educating myself on history, or trying to follow certain people and their thoughts or whatever, or get mentored by certain kinds of people. But I also, like, sometimes I have this kind of conflicting mindset that maybe if I get too much into that groove, like if I'm trying to follow what the world is going, maybe I get so immersed in it where I don't know. I don't know if I'm making the right point. I was going to say if it's going to affect my originality, it's not going to. Like, I'll give you a concrete example.
No,
Preeti.
I
Maybe
understand what you're saying. You know, it's possible that one can think like that, right? Because, for example, I'm going around and seeing all the art around me done by different people. I sometimes can also worry about the fact that I hope if I'm seeing too much, it's not influencing the way I'm going to express myself, because we are such visual people, right?
Mhm.
But and I think the third aspect of the previous question was, one is to spend time at your craft, your art. Second is to constantly be upgrading your knowledge and engage in those activities or discussions, etc. And the third, which is very important, is to spend time with yourself. So I think it's very important to actively take time out to delve into what you want to say. Fine, you've seen all this. We've all studied history. We're all looking at current affairs, etc. But what is it that you want to do with that information? And that's the hard part, actually, right? How do you assimilate everything? And in order to be, say, relevant, because all of us want to be relevant in some ways, right? How do you align yourself through all that experience? And that takes self-reflection. So you need to also take our time. I try to do that as well. And I'm increasingly feeling that I want to take more time out to spend just to spend time with only me, with nothing else around. And I live in a very, very active city with just so much stimulation, so much inspiration, so much activity. I think I'm increasingly feeling I need to go away for a few weeks, spend time at a residency or something, and just assimilate. And I think it's very important to do it from time to time. So you're in touch. That's the part about, deconstructing your own thought process. So all of it has to be. The thing is, when you're trying to do something, I understand what you're saying when you're looking at it. It's easy to sometimes maybe get influenced and say, oh, maybe this is a good way of doing something or approaching it. You've seen it working for someone, right?
Right.
And or you like something and you feel like, I like that, I want to do that. You know what? Sometimes give yourself permission to just pursue that thought.
Mm-hmm.
If you pursue every strong inclination, in my own experience, if you pursue every strong inclination about, I think maybe I can do that, I like that, or I like that outcome, I think I want to create that too, you will find it in no time as you start pursuing it, if it is something that speaks to you or not. If it doesn't speak to you, you are not going to pursue it because you will not feel fulfilled. And that's why, sometimes initially, when I was doing that series that you had asked me about once, Nefeli Batam, I was doing this series. It was a very eye-catching kind of a form that I was making. And some of my friends told me, oh, don't put it on Instagram. Somebody can easily copy what you're doing. It never scared me because I'm like, the thing is that I do not believe anybody can really copy what I'm doing because they don't know what's behind that thought process. They can only look at a visual image, but they don't know how I arrived at that, right? Until you can do that, it can never be the same thing. I don't think anybody can really, go very far with that kind of likeness. That difference, the integrity of the work really lies with the person and that person's thinking. That's what's critical to what comes out, right? Because if you're just going to replicate something that looks like something else, then it will just be that. Oh, looks like that, but is not that.
Mm-hmm.
Correct? Like somebody else can make a phone that looks like iPhone. But if it doesn't have all the impressive features, obviously I'm an iPhone user, but the effortless workings of
It's
that
a great phone.
phone,
Yeah. It's an amazing phone.
So it's not just about how it looks, it's
it
also about how it
feels.
functions, how it feels.
Yeah.
I mean, by now meaning long time back, that product is an icon.
Right.
It feels a certain way to have it, to use it, etc., etc. There's so many layers to how that product has reached where it is. So nobody can just say, okay, I'm going to create a sleek looking phone like iPhone. That's not going to take anybody very far, right? So that's why your mind is like that. As long as you're focused on being original, I won't even say being focused on it. I think just follow your deepest and truest passions. I'm saying you, and I'm also talking to myself. or anybody that's listening, I think because all of us have the same fears. Oh, if I see too much of something, will it start showing in my work also? And it does happen, right? In a certain era, when there were artists who started doing a certain kind of work, there were other artists who got inspired and influenced, and they did the same thing, but in a different way, in their own way. Right? So we will forever be, there's nothing so to say original anymore. Everything that is being said and done has already been said and done.
Right.
So within that, it's a trap, right? How do you find your own original expression? I don't think we need to stress so much about it that we are not able to produce itself. So there are inspirations, and we will continue to seek them. But we will also try to listen to ourselves and translate what is our voice. And it will take time. I think I'm still trying to find my voice. I can't say after working 20 years in the corporate, 15 years in the art world, I know what I'm doing or what I truly stand for. No, I don't. I may have a definitive voice about something that I'm doing today, but I am still seeking. It's not a static thing. It's a moving target, as they say, right? It's an evolution, especially as a creative person. It's not about creating one thing and then it just goes on and on and on. Or you can have a formula as well, and then you keep working on the same thing. That doesn't appeal to me. For me personally, this struggle will continue to go. This struggle, because I'm a seeker. I will stop existing when I'm not seeking. I'm very clear about it. So my art is not just about creating something that is physical, that's out in the world for people to see, understand, relate to, but it is also my own experience, which is important to me. Every artist is literally putting themselves into their work. And that's an important part of who I am as a creator.
Do you have moments where you kind of are a little bit nervous that nothing good will come out of?
Nothing good will come out of this question.
That's right.
But go on, I'm interested.
I proved my own question. Nothing good will come out of this. You talked about this kind of evolutionary epochs. I don't know if that's the right way to characterize it, but let's say you're working on a certain series or a certain motif or something like that for a while, and then you're like, man, I want to do something different. There's this kind of urge to do something different. I want to experiment with this or that. But then there's this kind of uncertainty associated with it, right? Because you haven't embarked on that space ever before. And it could also, on one side, it could crash and burn. On another side, it could do very well, and whatever the definition is. Or it could be somewhere in the middle where you're constantly learning. I guess have you experienced that kind of like angst from uncertainty?
Absolutely. I'm human. Not even at the pinnacle of what I do. So 100%. 100%. I will say that, for example, for a few years, once I was doing this series, the Felibata, and then followed by another series, they were kind of, one naturally followed the other, and I was in this flow for almost 8 years that I've been doing these painting series. And I personally feel I'm at an inflection point.
You mean now?
I think currently I am.
Yeah.
I have been very consistently, I've been very deeply engaged with all this work that I have been doing for last 8 years. But then I am exactly at that point. I think sometimes when I'm looking at, when I'm going along my paintings and I'm thinking, I want to experience this differently. I want this to be experienced differently. I think I want to weave in more of my experiences of past 8 years into what I'm doing and take it forward. And yes, there is that chance, right? That what I'm doing currently, it's being well received. And what if I change the formula And then something good may come out of it, something not so good may come out of it. But the point is, I have to be true to my own, sense of purpose. And if right now my purpose is to seek growth because it's coming truly from within, then I don't think I want to stop myself. So there will be some sort of activity I will engage in, which will help me to explore. And I am thinking of, for instance, I do these oil paintings, and I also work on mixed media using rice paper, digital images, wax, etc. And I have in the past done some sort of work where these two sort of come together. I did it for a while and then I left it because I didn't think I was going anywhere with it. I paused it. I'm going back to it again. But in addition to that, there are certain other areas that I'm exploring, some that I'm thinking of training myself in. So I don't know what the outcome will be, but I'm just going down that path. So it could be good, it could be bad, but it doesn't matter. Like I said, my approach has always been, you follow your instinct and then see where that takes you. At some point, you will know if it is working, it is not working, but nothing is going waste. If you're spending time in exploring, experimenting, it's all building towards your experience as an artist. And honestly, nothing just comes to an artist. It's not that whatever you've seen of my work just came to me. It's a derivative of several steps. My mixed media work started by, I think the first thing that happened was photography. I was doing this tons of photography, an observation-based process. At that point, I was not thinking of paper. So I think for 1 year, I was just doing photography. And that later on started building in as I looked more, I thought more. The inspirations that were around me at that point in time, that drew me towards rice paper. I was very inspired by Oriental arts, the art of storytelling on rice paper in some sort of a Chinese schools, calligraphy, a lot of Japanese art on paper, etc. I was looking a lot into all those things, aesthetics, the study of aesthetics in Japanese cultural and art areas, etc. So it was all a process. What you see today, some of my mixed media works, I didn't just go to my desk and say, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to do. It was, I think, a result of 3 years of work, and then all of it landed together and formed a certain work that had something to say that I wanted to say in the manner I wanted to say it at that point in time. Today, I feel like I want to add a little more to it. I want to say it a little differently, right? Because I'm evolving. I'm also exposed to different experiences. So now I want to add that to it. And it may work, it may not work. I don't know. I will not know till I try.
Yeah.
Right? So I will try. I am going to acquire some additional skills in areas that I'm interested in. For example, printmaking, encaustic paintings, etc. I've never professionally done any courses in this, but I'm thinking of doing those as they relate to my work in some ways. And I want to focus on that specifically and then see what can I take from there that I can add to my work. It may not work. I may go back to what I was doing, etc.
Okay. That's cool. Sorry?
Does it make sense?
Makes a ton of sense. I mean, it resonates with me a lot because I also kind of take courses online quite a bit to upgrade skills here or there or whatever it is. And I sort of have this kind of inkling in my not subconscious, but some kind of like nagging voice in the back, like which says like, they talk about these mad genius creatives who just have this infinite reservoir of talent, and then they don't really have to go learn something from somebody. They just kind of prolifically keep putting stuff out. And I think to myself, am I that sort of inferior grade quality guy where I have to constantly learn? And I don't think I'm inferior grade quality guy. I'm just saying that I go and seek all these pieces of knowledge so I can just enhance and add and stuff like that. And you're in a sense, you're validating that sort of process that I have in a way too. It was very uncommon too at work. For example, Preeti, is that in a corporate work, I should say, is that people would point out often that, oh, I was, you're interested in continuous learning a lot. Like they would say this thing as though it was like it was this thing that needed to be pointed out, and just this odd thing. And I thought to myself, like I thought everybody did this, and I guess not in some cases. But what you're saying, I mean, I love it. I mean, it's music to my ears.
Absolutely. But then again, it doesn't matter if others are not doing it. If that's
it doesn't.
What truly inspires you, by all means, keep doing it.
Keep evolving, keep growing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we have so many examples of amazing people that have done this and keep doing it. I mean, if you look at some of your heroes, I mean, I don't know if it is Steve Jobs. You know what he was doing before so many different things came up in Apple, how he took that time off, how he went to India and he was meditating and he did this, some sort of a course in calligraphy or something like that. Imagine it had nothing to do with what he used to do.
Yeah, good point.
He listened to himself, right? He did exactly whatever, he went seeking exactly whatever his mind and heart was seeking. He didn't stop. And just see how that translated into his work.
Right.
Wasn't Apple one of the first companies that came up with so many different typefaces?
I think so. Yeah.
He created that.
Yeah.
Right? And it was inspired by that time he spent learning calligraphy, and then I think something or the other. I can't remember the whole story from his book, but that's how it happened.
Yeah, even his I believe the iOS operating system they used, like a lot of it came from, he started his own company called Next Computing. So it was this kind of a style of programming that he had introduced there, and he brought all of that to bear into Apple. So yeah, to that point, nothing goes to waste. It's always you put in, you get out of something as much as you put in.
Yeah, I mean, same thing.
Or more.
It's all an additive, everything just keeps going into the final product. I don't know what the final product is, though. We are constantly evolving, and that goalpost keeps shifting.
Yeah. Like, this is one thing, Preeti, I bugs me a little bit, is that in my city that I live in, I wish we had more kind of art forms and things. So in preparation for this discussion, I read a couple books. So The Artist's Journey and How Your Brain is on Art. I think that's the title of the book. Your Brain on Art, sorry. And the point that they kind of keep making is that these kind of extremely therapeutic effects of looking at artwork, whatever it might be, whatever form it is in, and all this research that's just like, there's a lot of evidence when people are exposed to art and nature and things like that, it just has this kind of restorative effect. It there's just a tight correlation to a lot of positive things. So it's like, as a part of, like, even like from advocacy and things like that, I'm thinking, like, I wish my city had less of a concrete look and more of that kind of, like, you have art forms in every street corner and things like that. They just kind of remind you that there's this aesthetic in life that should draw you and just sort of make you reflect a little bit, and rather than just looking at brown strip malls on the left and right of the street.
I'm so blessed to be in this city. New York City is it's just amazing. It's
Yeah.
just exploding with creativity and invention, and uh, it's like a full-on experience of life. Everything that you can think of is happening here and going on here. And people are just exploring and experimenting with different things. And one of the things that really makes me happy is when I'm walking around and I see these various forms of public art.
Mm.
And I'm a big believer of art in public space because it completely, uh, I think, amongst many other things, it democratizes art, right? It's not
Mhm.
just a thing that you have to go to a fancy gallery to see or just in a museum, places of sort of prestige and obvious spaces where you can find art. And many people find that intimidating.
What's intimidating?
Walking into a museum or going into a gallery because
Oh,
they
yeah.
need to be well versed and they need to be able to make some sort of an artistically stimulating conversation or understand it, and they become a little apprehensive,
Hmm.
right? But when you see art in public spaces, it's the most beautiful experience to happen, where people can just see whatever they are seeing and process their own thought process and enjoy that piece of art. Because it's not, one is, of course, like you said, the aesthetic aspect of it. And if you notice, a lot of works that are in public art, um, I think have to sort of conform to some sort of aesthetics because it needs to stand out. In a crowded space, if you suddenly put a public art and it's so subtle that nobody can even see it, either in size or the way it has been commissioned, etc. So you will find that there is a certain kind of language, materials, etc., that are used in a public art thing. But that is just one aspect of it. You'll see some sort of a structure, some sculpture, something or the other, right? But then there is a thought behind it. And most of these public art, uh, not most, all of them have to relate to the environment where they are in. Again, they're not just plonked out there. Artists, curators have to submit it's very tedious. You have to
Oh, really?
really work on a proposal and say why and what you are proposing and how does it fit into that, how does it speak to the space around it, the demographics, everything
Okay.
has to make sense. So that's the thing about art. That's what makes it special. It's not just something that you take in visually, whether you're going to a museum, gallery, or you're experiencing a public art, but that is the importance of art and culture. It makes you think. And any good art should make you think. It shouldn't just stop at your, eyes meeting something visually, and then you look at it and then you move on to the next thing. But if it makes you look at it, ponder, experience something internally, ask some questions, then I think as an artist, I have succeeded in taking some amount of your mind space and cultivated some nature of thinking and made you, in that moment, be very present and take you away from everything else. So I think art in anywhere, public spaces, is just such a beautifully inspiring interaction. And I totally agree with you. Some of us who live in these cities are just blessed with it.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm obviously a little more alive to it because that's where my mind is 100% of the time. So I'm walking around, I'm just taking in and absorbing these vibrations. For instance, I live on the 72nd Street and there is a subway platform here. And there is a building right next door where uh, Lennon used to live.
Wow.
And Ono still has an apartment there. I don't know if she still lives there, but she used to, at least for a couple of months. So the subway station, which is right literally below that apartment building, uh, Yoko Ono has executed a beautiful uh, work out there at the subway. And she's taken inspiration from, the song Imagine,
Mm.
and that feeling of, beautiful free world. There's a lovely white and blue work which is adorning that station. Every time I come home or I'm leaving somewhere, that work always puts me in a very different state of mind. And the words Imagine. And that is what, people say art, um, in some ways, it's totally dispensable, right? Because who can afford it? And people only who can afford it or have the luxury of, embarking on it. But the point is, can you imagine life without art or culture? No matter how small a role we think it's playing in the economics of a place. But look at what it does. Imagine no music, no paintings, no sculptures, no theater, no, I don't know, no shows, no movies. So,
I feel
my,
like everything. I feel like everything is art, right? Like if even engineering is like if you're putting out a truck, for example, that is also some. There was no truck prior to that, and somebody put out a truck. There was this creative moment where these things came together, and that is also a form of art. That's okay.
yeah, sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, I was just going to making the point that you were talking about. Some people have this notion that art is dispensable. I guess I was making the opposite point that art is indispensable because art comes in like even if you think about engineering, it is. I mean, we put a name on it. We put engineering. Is the kind of like the English word that kind of limits the kind of work, but there's a lot of there is this creative element. There was no transmissions in a truck before, and then somebody came up with these wheel structures that mesh with each other, and then they reduce speed and increase torque and all these things. Like these are all creative, somebody's creative act at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think art uh, was the first form of recording history. Is that critical? So uh, I'm going back to the cave art, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day when they were making those very rudimentary figures of a man hunting or a woman cooking, etc., they were recording their times, right?
Right.
So literally, that was like the first piece of recorded history. And all of us as artists are doing that. We are in, I think what we are doing is that we are presenting something that relates to our current times. And artists have done that through the ages. If you go back and look at various movements in art history, or the kind of art that was being made, it all relates to the current times, their current times, right? There was so much art that was made um, from the pain and agony of wars. So much art that was made, right? And similarly, I mean, somebody like Andy Warhol, he was making a commentary on when back in the day the whole capitalist movement was taking grips and increased consumerism, etc. And artists find a way to be motivated by their current times, and that informs their work. And that's how they express themselves. And that's how they speak to, let's call it an issue or something of that nature, a commentary on our times. So that's an interesting part.
Yeah, I'm pondering over that point and thinking like anyway. not worth
It
making the
has
point.
to be relevant, right? Whatever we are doing today, I mean, if we are talking about AI, is because AI is relevant today. It's one of the most talked about things, etc. So I think art is very similar. Within that, painting, I think, is a traditional art form, but it still remains relevant today. But what people are doing with that art form and how it relates to the situation is something that you will be able to see if you go to a museum and you go to different aspects and how they display the art, right, through a certain period, and then move on to more current period contemporary art. You will see the difference in how artists express themselves, and that's evolution. That's speaking to the times of the period that they were present in, and what all we are seeing now, which is relevant to current times. So much of technology based art.
Hmm.
So art has not just stayed limited to just painting and drawing or creating sculptures, but there is so much that is going on today because it represents our current times. And people have found new ways to say things and speak to those technologies and use those technologies to express their ideas.
Yeah, and there's a lot of utility to it, right? Like there's this guy Danish Sate. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah.
He's he's a he does a lot of mimicry and satire and things like that. That guy, I mean, he's from Bangalore, and he captures the essence of almost every stereotype I grew up with in Bangalore. Like, Ram Murthy Avre, it's this kind of like uncle kind of figure, and just an older gentleman or whatever, and just got this range of people that he mimics, and it makes it funny. And I was thinking, man, this guy carved out such a niche for himself, and it's just so hilarious. It's satirical. It has an effect of us wanting to reflect on ourselves because we kind of fall into those kind of stereotypical traps. Um, I'm so thankful that this guy exists, for example. He just kind of makes me laugh my ass off. But I also think to people who are looking at it, like, I hope you reflect a little bit. I hope society reflects on itself. And there's so much of a utility to that, right? Like the art has, I feel like you could not sit down somebody and lecture somebody, but you can appeal to their feelings, their senses in that technology-based art. And it's just very underrated in society of how much of a sort of an impact it has on our psyches and our subconscious and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I don't think it's a deniable fact at all,
Yeah.
right? And today, even more so, somebody I was talking to made this big remark about how, in the end, artists are going to save the world. Art is going, not artists, art is going to save the world.
Mm.
As we are at different levels getting, as a world and species, getting gloomy. I
Yeah.
think so much of the world is also now focusing on alternative ways to approach life, whether it is getting more into themselves through meditation, yoga, or doing some deep thinking, or pursuing arts in a very different way, healing, etc., etc. It's a very interesting world that we live in today.
Yeah.
Possibilities are endless, and to me, that will forever remain exciting.
Yeah. We've been going for a while. I want to be sensitive to your time, Preeti. I know you're a busy
Yes,
person.
I was about to say that, and that I think is a very happy note to end on. That the
Yes, it is.
possibilities are endless. I have to go and support some friends of mine who are having a show today.
Okay.
And they have an opening tonight. So yes, I'd like to part of my life to show up for my friends and see what they're doing. So yes.
Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your time, your valuable experience, your knowledge, your intelligence, your intellect, your feelings, everything. I learned a lot. I'll definitely be watching this over and over again, learning even
You're very
more.
kind. You're very kind. Thank
No,
you.
no, I absolutely mean it. And I really appreciate it, Preeti, for coming on the Idea Sandbox. I really appreciate it. You're given, this is a gift to me and the world.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. I managed to say whatever I could, but I totally enjoyed this very free-flowing conversation. I thought we were going to talk a lot about my work, but this was very comfortable. I didn't have to talk a lot about my work, but more about,
Yeah.
ideas that we can relate to and, how my work might relate to that. So, yes, the possibilities are endless, and I wish you all the best in your journey, creative or otherwise. And we should keep talking. You never know. Maybe at some point in time when we are both at a different, at a different stage in our lives, it'll be great to reconnect. But in the meantime, I wish you the best. And
thank you. I wish you the best too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.